Shana Tova and Shabbat Shalom. Happy 5781. How many times have you heard in the last few months the phrase, "We are living in uncertain times"? If you're like me, it seems that those few words are on everyone's lips. And what about the phrase, "We are adjusting to a new normal"? I've been trying to adjust for these last 6 months, but I think it's easier said than done. As the coronavirus has upended our lives and livelihoods, we've lived with incredible anxieties and fears, difficulty, illness, and sadly, death. We're approaching more than 1 million people who have died from the novel coronavirus. While most of the world is getting back to its regularly scheduled lives, including travel, we here in the United States seem to be still floundering without adequate testing, tracing, or a nationally coordinated response. And without these things, I fear that we will remain in trouble for our country. The economic uncertainties are scary, given so many that are out of work right now. The uncertainty wrought by climate change, with the firestorms that are around our states, the devastation of seasonal flooding and hurricanes, these raise alarm bells and keep our bodies on high alert. And the grief and pain and frustration of our Black family and friends, our fellow Jews of color, as time and again racism has exerted its ugly and often deadly hand. It's heartbreaking and unsettling. The clear rise in anti-Semitism in our country, even here in our beloved Los Angeles, as banners were unfurled over the 405, saying Jews want a race war, honk if you agree. Well, that puts us all on edge. And there's so much at stake this coming November with the presidential election for the future of our country. It is a time to be rightly concerned with all that is happening now. It feels a bit apocryphal to me, and it is worrisome. So the question that I want to pose to you tonight as we enter this new year is, if we are indeed living in such highly uncertain times, how can we get through it? How can we adjust to an ever-changing situation where the new normal is uncertainty? And how can we embrace the new year and its marvelous potential to bring us the hope and inspiration, strength and fortitude that we need to overcome the many adversities in front of us and the uncertainties and anxieties that we are all sharing in? Ann Matson, a PhD and a psychologist and professor at the University of Minnesota, teaches this. She said, "This is an unprecedented disaster for most of us. It's profound in its impact on our daily lives, but it's different from a hurricane or a tornado where you can look outside and see the destruction and damage. This, for most people, is invisible and ongoing. So many systems during the pandemic are not working as they normally do, which means radical shifts in the way we work and school and home life that almost none of us have ever experienced before. Even those who have worked in disaster recovery or served in the military are facing a different kind of uncertainty right now," she said. But my friends, we want certainty. We want to know certainty because it brings us comfort, the knowledge of expectations that help us stay grounded. According to Pershing Square Professor of Human Neuroscience at Harvard, Dr. Elizabeth Phelps, resolving uncertainty is a major challenge of the brain, whether it's determining what we are seeing or hearing or deciding the accuracy of a memory. She said, ambiguity is the one type of uncertainty that is more aversive to people. So we might be more likely to do nothing than to have to deal with the ambiguity that's out there in the world, she taught. In other words, my friends, that's paralysis. We become helpless, depressed, and unable to cope. It's harder to get things done because we're all resisting at some deep level when the risks are unknown and uncertainty about the future is high. It may be why so many of us are feeling exhausted and worn down. It may be why so many of us cry more easily or are short-tempered. And it's why so many of us, let's just be honest and say it, we're depressed about the state of our country and the world. We're sad. Many of us are lonely, missing family and friends and the joys and pace of what used to be our lives. I'm afraid we just aren't built for this. It's traumatizing to live this way with such uncertainty in this long period of time. It changes us, changes our mental well-being, our emotional well-being, and impacts our physical well-being as well. I want to share this story taught by Rabbi Jordy Gerson. She said, a few weeks ago, I was talking to a friend who's a psychologist. We were talking about how tired we were and how tired everyone is, and she told me something fascinating. That another friend of hers, a therapist who specializes in trauma and catastrophes, told her that usually a major societal rupture happens in a U shape or a V shape. In a U, things are fine, and then suddenly something awful happens, like a 9/11. The line goes down. The world is out of sorts for a while, and then, slowly, there's recovery. In the V, everything is fine at the top. Then Newtown or a Parkland happens, and we go into massive crisis mode. And then all too soon, the world returns to the way it was. Right now, this therapist said, we are living in an L. And in an L, there is no visible way back up. No end in sight. The trauma, the rupture, the quarantine just keeps going and going, on and on and on. As human beings, we are not psychologically equipped to live in an L. We don't know how to live that way. You might say the L word has a whole new meaning. But our people, the Jewish people, are experts at living with uncertainty. They knew how to live in the L. We come from a people who have built a life and a faith despite, and perhaps in spite of life's uncertainties. My friends, you are the inheritors of a glorious legacy that has lived with uncertainty for millennia. Our entire Jewish story is built upon a foundation of coping with the unknown, of living in the L. Think about it for a moment. We were enslaved for 400 years in Egypt, never knowing when we would be set free. And then our ancestors wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. They lived with uncertainty. They were promised a land somewhere out there beyond the Nile, beyond Mount Sinai, a land that I will show you, said God. They too lived with plagues and battle scars from the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Amalekites, the Egyptians. They followed some man named Moses, who had visions and spoke of a land flowing with milk and honey. But they never could get there. All of it was uncertain. And then our ancestors, time and again, were exiled, first by the Assyrians who carried off the 10 tribes, and then the Babylonians who destroyed our first temple, and the Romans came and destroyed the second temple. Each dispersed our people worldwide. We Jews lived in uncertainty. How could we cope when our whole way of life was upended? God's holy house destroyed. You see, our story, the Jewish story, your story, is actually a story of uncertainty. And we never knew if we could return and restore our land and our country. For more than 2,000 years, our people longed and prayed and remembered the ancient temple as it stood in Jerusalem on every Shabbat, on every Tisha B'Av, at every wedding as the glass was broken. Every day we prayed to restore our people to our ancient land, even in our uncertainty. And during the Inquisition in Spain and Portugal, we lived with uncertainty, expelled from our homes, forced to convert to Catholicism. We practiced in secret the faith of our ancestors. Fears and uncertainty marked our days and our nights. But we as a people not only survived, but we thrived despite the uncertainty. Yes, you are the heirs to this legacy of strength. And in uncertain times, we Jewish people turn to our faith and tradition and the words of our ancestors, familiar and worn like a polished stone. In uncertain times, our ancestors turned to one another for strength. It worked for them. Let it work for us as well. Take Shabbat, for example. Tonight is the first Sabbath of the new year. Shabbat is a hedge against uncertainty. One of the things so many of you have told me over the last months is that since we have been shut down, many of you have found new meaning in Shabbat. You look forward to it in a way that you didn't before. Now, why is that? Because Shabbat interrupts the days that go on without end when you are sheltering in place. You're taking time to light the candles, make the kiddush, maybe even bake a challah bread, and each marks a demarcation of holy space and time. It helps us cope with the uncertainties. You see, when Tuesday runs into Wednesday and Wednesday into Thursday, Shabbat comes and settles upon us with rituals and music and special foods to interrupt the monotony and uncertainties of life. And without the distractions of theater and restaurants and movies, as fun as they are, Shabbat now is an opportunity to proactively change your environment spiritually. Shabbat comes each and every week without fail. It is an antidote to uncertainty. During the High Holy Day seasons, our ancestors gave voice to that uncertainty when they prayed, "Who shall live and who shall die? Who by stoning and who by plague? Who shall be rich and who shall be poor?" These words of the Unatana Tokef prayer is our voice of uncertainty, of fear, of wanting to control the future, but recognizing that it is not in our hands. The inscription in the Sefer HaChaim, the book of life that we seek, that we want written, is precisely because everything is so uncertain. Not just now, today, during the pandemic, but my friends, the uncertainties of life have always been there. The great psychotherapist Viktor Frankl, tortured and imprisoned by the Nazis, knew something about living for years with uncertainty, with fear, and with danger. He said, "Forces beyond your control can take away everything you possess except one thing, your freedom to choose how you will respond to the situation." Our Unatana Tokef prayer teaches us how to respond. Utshuva, utfila, utzdaka. Practice turning over the situation. Engage in prayer and reflection. And breathe deeply and meditate and calm your soul for uncertain times. And by practicing justice and charity that create order and agency. These are the ways Judaism teaches us to renew and to build resilience and fortitude in the difficult days of life. Shabbat, holy days, build a structure upon which to build our existence when everything seems out of control. This is what will get you through the L, the long haul. Our sacred community of Kol Ami is your partner in navigating these uncertain times. And together, my friends, we will rise. In closing, I want to share a story of our tradition based on a tale told by the great theologian Martin Buber. It's a story about a king who could not banish his sorrow. No matter what he tried, the remedies prepared by the doctors, the advice offered by his wise counselors, he continued to be unhappy, becoming more despondent each and every day that passed. In desperation, messengers were sent out across the land, promising a reward to anyone who could help the king. The greatest experts came to the palace and tried their very best, but to no avail. A few days later, an old man dressed in work clothes arrived at the palace gates. "I am a farmer," he said, "a student of nature. I've come to help the king," he said. "The king doesn't need your help," said the counselor. "I shall wait then," said the farmer, "until he is prepared to see me." With each passing day, the king's condition worsened. He felt sad and helpless, and he saw no end to his suffering. Finally, when all hope was lost, the counselor let the old man in. Without uttering a word, the man approached the king, handed him a simple wooden ring, and then he left. The king looked at the ring and read the inscription that was etched upon the ring. And he slipped it on his finger. And for the first time in months, he smiled. "What does it say, Your Majesty?" asked the counselor. The king said, "It says 3 small words. Gam ze ya'avor. This too shall pass." My friends, the uncertainties of our time will pass. Gam ze ya'avor. Our world will change. The sun will set and rise again in the morning. Shabbat will come, and the new year has arrived, and the old one is now history. Let us turn in strength to one another and our God, even as we face an uncertain future. And let us use the power of Jewish heritage to help us build a daily life that is grounded, holy, strong, and secure. Let us use the values of faith and friendship, justice and kindness, learning and loving our neighbor as ourselves. And let us gauge in this new year in acts of tshuva, turning and prayer, tefillah, and yes, tzedakah, to help us order our lives and our society and create agency. Let us use our minds and our hearts to take us on that journey of wholeness, hope, and peace. Ken Yehi Ratzon, so may it be God's will.
Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova. My name is Todd Cohen, and I am the treasurer of our temple. On behalf of the Board of Trustees of our congregation, we would like to welcome you to Erev Rosh Hashanah and wish you a happy and sweet and healthy new year. These have been difficult and strange months since the pandemic started, but I'm so proud of our congregation for stepping up and meeting the challenge. Thank you to our rabbis for their work and our